Okay, we are recording. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. Is it Friday? Happy Friday. Oh shoot. Billy, I'm the worst at this. We are really excited. I'm just pulling up my agenda here. We are really excited to welcome everybody here. I see that Judy is here, and I think David, are you here as well? Jake, it looks like, is here, and John. I have sent a request to Olivia in hopes that she can join the committee as well, but haven't heard anything back. So I will keep everybody updated as to that development. But we're really excited to have everybody together in one space. Welcome to all the members of the public that are here. Thank you for joining us today. And all of our intrepid State of Vermont agency support staff, also deeply grateful you're here today as well. Okay, onward to the business at hand. Billy, do you want to just dive right into some meeting logistics pieces to get that out of the way to get into the real of the conversation?
So since we have some new members here, it probably makes sense for all of the subcommittee members, existing and new, to just do some real quick introductions. Then I think we do need to approve our minutes from the last meeting. So I can kick that off. My name is Billy Koster. I'm the Director of Natural Resources Planning for the Agency of Natural Resources. I'm a co-chair with Abby of this subcommittee. My background is in energy and land use policy and regulation, as well as land conservation. And thank you all to the new members willing to join our group. Lauren, why don't you're the next person I see. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, glad to see the newly expanded subcommittee members joining us. I'm Lauren Oates. I work with the Nature Conservancy. I've been appointed to the Climate Council as the member who represents experience with natural hazard resilience. So I'm excited to talk about nature-based solutions, some natural climate solutions, and the like with all of you. And I'll pass it over to Ryan.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Good afternoon, everyone. Ryan Patch with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I'm here on behalf of Secretary Tebbets. I am the Deputy Director of the Water Quality Division. We have a focus in regulating farms of all sizes for agricultural water quality standards, but we've also engaged in work around ecosystem services and other related benefits from agricultural land management. Looking forward to the work of this subcommittee over the next year. And I'll pass it over to Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. I had a soup overspill. But yeah, I am the youth rep and I live in Hyde Park, and I'm really happy to be part of this conversation and make positive change.
Great. And then why don't we go with some of our new members here. The first person I see on my screen is John Roberts. So John, would you mind giving a quick introduction?
Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. I'm John Roberts. I'm the Executive Director of the Champlain Valley Pharma Coalition, which is based in Middlebury, Vermont. I personally live in Cornwall, Vermont, and I haven't been out of my basement since March of last year. So, the coalition is a group of about 100 farmer members, from some of the biggest in the state to a beekeeper, both conventional and organic, and obviously have a great interest in what ag can do to benefit our climate. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, John. And Judy, if you're still on with us, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Judy Dow. I live in Essex. I'm the Executive Director of Yadakina, a Native organization that works with women and their families throughout New England to self-determine a good path. and we do a lot of teaching around traditional ecological knowledge. And so I thought I might be able to help in that area.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see. Jake Claro, are you with us today?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone. So Jake Claro, I'm the Farm to Plate Director at the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund. And so with that, I also help to coordinate the Farm to Plate Network, which is 300 plus organizations in the food system. And we just released the new 10-year strategic plan for the state of Vermont, which we're really excited about. And certainly the work of this committee intersects quite a bit with the new plan. And also I'm excited about this just from a kind of selfishly from a personal perspective. I did my thesis work on ecosystem services on farmland in Vermont. And so this is tying in, I think, a lot of things that I, in a past life, was working closely on and really interested in. So just excited to kind of be able to bring that to the table as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see. David Mears.
Thanks, Billy. David Mears, I'm the Executive Director of Audubon, Vermont. And I'm an environmental lawyer, and I've spent a lot of my career either teaching law or in the public sector, working on environmental policy. And very excited to be part of this group. Thanks for the invitation to join this really critical conversation and a timely one. So I'm looking forward to contributing any way I can. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Let's see, is Ben Machin on the call today? No? Okay. And I know that Alyssa White, another member of ours, I don't think can make it today. So I think that rounds out the subcommittee members. Jane, would you take a second to introduce yourself and kind of explain your role to folks?
Sure. Afternoon, everybody. I'm Jane Lazorchek. I am the newly hired director of the Global Warming Solutions Act. I actually am a trained biologist in my former life. That's what my master's is in. And I've worked in land conservation for the last 15 years for the Fish and Wildlife Department. Stepping into this role, hoping to bring project management experience in helping facilitate cross-pollination between all 5 subcommittees and advancing policy and procedural issues on behalf of the Climate Council and Steering Committee to work us forward into drafting a climate action plan that will be put forward to the legislature by December 1st this coming year. So I'm here to hopefully offer guidance, answer any questions, and I'll sit in as often as I can on your subcommittee meetings. So especially this one, since it's nearest and dearest to my heart, actually. So thanks.
Great. And we're joined, in addition to Jane, we're really fortunate to have a number of highly qualified state of Vermont employees serving as subject matter experts supporting the committee. So let's spin through those folks quickly. Alexandra, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandra Gasiba. You can call me Allie. That's fine, too. I am the State of Vermont Climate Forester. My background is in forest ecology and tree physiology and carbon dynamics, climate change impacts on forests. So happy to be here.
Great. And Alex, how about you?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad it is, in fact, Friday, Abby. I am with the Agency of Ag, looking at this through the lens, especially of business development related to energy and carbon drawdown. And yeah, thanks.
Bob Pop.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Pop. I'm the botanist for the state with the Natural Heritage Inventory in the Fish and Wildlife Department. And I'm really excited to provide whatever support I can for this subcommittee. I think it's vital, important work that you're doing. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thanks, Bob. And we've got a couple additional staff who aren't with us right now. Marley Roop from the Department of Environmental Conservation and Judson Peck from the Ag Agency. All right. So let's just quickly approve our minutes from the last meeting. I think those are circulated. Only the folks who attended, feel free to participate in this vote. But do we actually have to vote on these, Jan?
So in thinking about trainings for members that we'll talk about a little bit later, one of the things you all should know, obviously, is the approach of the Climate Council and then the subcommittees is a consensus model. And so recognizing there should just be a space to air any grievances or express changes that you want to see in the minutes, but otherwise, if none are noted, consensus carries the day.
All right, we all good with the minutes from last meeting? Excellent. Okay, so we have a limited amount of time today and a tight agenda, and my apologies to the new subcommittee members. We kind of built this agenda before we were clear whether you all would be able to join us. We've been in desperate need to do some scheduling and knock out some logistical issues so that we can be in a better position to focus on the substantive work. So that's what we're going to spend a lot of time doing today. But certainly, please feel free to ask questions, and to the extent we can save some time on other items and create some space for a broader conversation for you all to ask questions around process or substance, we'll certainly do that. And then Jane, I think you wanted to provide some comments right now as well, correct?
Sure. Would you like me to go now before you jump in?
Sure.
I just wanted, as I won't be able to stay for the whole meeting today, and I just wanted to draw your attention to some future resources as well as asks of the subcommittee. So I wanted to just first and foremost recognize that all the additional subcommittee members, you all will be getting State of Vermont email addresses, and all business for the Climate Council should occur through your state email addresses. I'm working on getting the final list from all the subcommittees and getting you all those email addresses, and we'll figure out how to communicate that with you all, as well as any training you might need to access that and use those going forward. Along those same lines, the Climate Council itself had training on the Open Meeting Law and Public Records Act at the start of the Climate Council back in November and December. The expectation now is that training would be good for additional subcommittee members, but rather than asking everybody to sit through those trainings, an email, hopefully by the end of today, will be coming from me that will provide you links to the presentations that were given to the Climate Council with an ask that you all watch it, in addition to the PowerPoints that were shown as resources for you all. And then an ask of subcommittees to make room in their agendas for either your next meeting or the following meeting, recognizing that you're likely meeting on an annual basis right now, to include myself and Matt Chapman to just allow a guided conversation. Matt Chapman, I should say, is the General Counsel for Agency of Natural Resources. And that way, folks can just have a conversation about how those laws apply to you all and your work. Specifically, some of the sort of things that aren't as intuitive with open meeting law is email correspondence and those lines. So I'd like to provide that training for you all, and we will do that. So look for that email from me. And then the next comment I'll just say is, as you transition into thinking about work planning for future meetings, I've also been working with a small group on preparing a Gantt chart for each subcommittee to use as a tool to map out the work in front of you all and the milestones that we're asking of you to complete in the next, specifically between now and June, which is a lot of the substantive work for the subcommittees. And that will be provided to you along with sort of a template and some sidebars for a work plan, with the expectation that the meat of the March 22nd Climate Council meeting will be presentations and discussion around subcommittee work plans and timelines, in addition to considerations for the technical contracts that we'll be going out to prepare, hopefully transitioning from the Climate Council meeting to the RFPs for technical analyses. So in addition to work planning and timeline mapping, we'll be working with you all on some considerations for technical analyses. And I think that'll have to do a lot with the ag sector emissions work that you'll all be doing in collaboration with the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee. So lots to come, and some long meetings, and hopefully that'll tee you up to have an understanding as you think about setting your ongoing meetings and what sort of amount of time you'll need as you gather in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Jane. One question. Do you have a sense of when that work plan template may be available to the subcommittees?
Yeah, I would have liked to have said today, but I'll say Monday.
Okay, great. So we'll have it by whenever we meet next week.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know, Abby, any comments? Others, any thoughts on what Jane just shared? All right. So the next thing we want to focus on is just trying to set a standing meeting for the group. We've been kind of scheduling things on an ad hoc basis, but now that we've grown the participation of the group, I think having some predictability around where we're going to meet week to week is going to be really important. Understanding not everyone's going to be able to make every meeting, but at least having that as a goal. And in our next conversation, we're going to get into the milestones for our work, and it's an incredibly heavy lift between now and the end of May, when we need to have basically a draft proposal for the full climate council. So over the next 3 months, we're going to be busy, and I think there's an expectation that we're going to have to meet as a full subcommittee and likely, work on our own outside of the group and potentially establish some smaller targeted working groups. But at this point, we at least want to get the full subcommittees scheduled. And I open it up to others thinking, but in talking with Abby, we thought, meeting at least once a week for anywhere from 90 to 100, 90 minutes to 2 hours may make sense. We might not always need to use all that time, but having it on the calendar is probably prudent. And, I think a goal today is just to see if there's a time that we can settle on. And Abby, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, that sounds good. The one thing I've wondered is, just since we do have more subcommittee members here, if we do want to ask, does everyone here think this is the best either use of our time today in this moment, or the best way to go about this? I mean, do people like doodle polls better? I'm open to other scheduling methods if that's better for everyone. So I did just want to offer that out there, that, if we don't think that this is the most effective way to do it, I think Billy and I are open to that as well. It's just that we're really trying to make sure that we get a standing meeting time of a significant block of time so that we can actually get into the meat of some of this work. Since, as he mentioned, the deadline is looming. Thoughts?
All right.
Yeah, I'll throw in a thought. Yeah, no problem. One thing, I'm the new guy, so what do I have to lose?
I like it.
I mean, I think it would be good to at least determine, are we talking about 90 minutes? Or are we talking about 2 hours? I think that's something that we can agree on here in this call. And then, yeah, I'm intrigued to see if we could find a block of time immediately, or if it would require us to look at our calendars and maybe move some things around based on understanding that that's the time block we need. Yeah, first step to me feels like just figuring out what amount of time do we actually need to schedule for a standing meeting.
Lauren? Thank you, Jake.
I like the new guy's thoughts. Thanks, Jake. I'll just go ahead and to move the conversation. I think given the workload that is ahead of us and the very short time frame, I think it makes more sense to go a larger block of time, and we can always get out early. So I'd recommend 2 hours once a week.
Okay.
And we've so far been meeting on kind of this Friday early afternoon block. I know that works for me. I think it works for some others. So I don't know if that's where we want to kind of start the bidding, so to speak. And here,
I will just say that I have to get kids at the very inconvenient hour of 2:15 to 3 o'clock, which conveniently chops my afternoon in half. So if we're looking for a 2-hour block, it will have to be on either side of that. But aside from that, we can start with Fridays if that works for everybody else.
David, you got your hand up.
Yeah, my apologies. Friday afternoon, I have a mandatory meeting every week that I have to do. That's 1 o'clock that I don't have control over. There's nothing else, as everything else on my calendar, I could shift and adjust. That just happens to be the one time. So between 1 and 2:30, after 2:30, I'm free.
Okay.
I can also do Fridays. Either like late mornings or late afternoons work best for me because I have school. But yeah, other than that, but I'm flexible.
Okay.
Friday also works for me, except I have occasional Friday meetings from 12:30 to 2.
Okay, yeah. Lauren just suggested 10 to 12, which might on Fridays, which seems like might work for folks. I can make that work.
How about we do it this way? Is there anybody that can't make 10 to 12 work?
Of all the subcommittees that have set recurring meetings, there's not one during that time right now. So
Dang.
take it. There is one already from 4 to 5 on Fridays. So
We don't
if you
want
were
that.
looking for like a 3 to 5, that would be hard, you know.
All right.
Hearing no, I'm going to say this is a silent consensus for 10 to 12 on Fridays for standing meeting. Sweet. Okay. I will just say that as I messaged Billy earlier today, as a farmer, this may need to be adjusted as the season changes, although I think I can make that time work. And also I want to be cognizant of the fact that Olivia is not here either. And I want to, be open to whatever incoming members' schedules require. So this may be revisited, but good work, everybody, and getting something on the calendar so quick. I'm impressed.
And it looks like that time works for Alyssa as well, based on the email she sent to Abby.
Cool. So, do we want to go on to our major milestones piece? Is that next?
Yeah, I think there's a few other kind of logistical details that we can sort out, but I don't think they're pressing at this point. So moving on works for me unless others have anything on the logistics side. Lauren.
Yeah, sorry to keep raising my hand. I did want to flag what I brought up at the end of the last meeting, which was to have a liaison from Ag and Ecosystem Subcommittee over to the cross-sector mitigation. We kind of all were head nodding, but it was well over our 1 hour together. We've since talked to the steering committee and agreed that that would make sense. And I believe that cross-sector mitigation has also, I'm seeing nods from Jane, and she's been to all of these meetings, so she's better for that. It would need to be a council member, so one of the, I think probably only 3 of us. And I recommended, or I offered myself up, but I'm happy to have a conversation about what that would look like. But I did want to nail that down because I know cross-sector mitigation is starting to meet frequently and they'll be having similar conversations. So we should have somebody in the mix soon.
I'm fine with you being that person and deeply appreciate it. Sophia or Ryan, any issue with that?
Nope. I fully support you, Lauren, and trust your instinct on this. So, thank you.
Yeah, certainly no objections. Diane Boswell from the Agency of Agriculture will be working to support the cross-sector mitigation work happening there. And so as far as agricultural interface to deal with that emission sector, that should work fine.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren, for being willing to do that. And certainly, if there is a day that arises that you're not able to be there and need one of us to jump in, please just let us know. Any other logistical pieces?
Great. Well, let me.
What about? Sorry.
What was that, Sophia?
What about note taking? Should we have like someone who? Because I don't want Lauren to be note taking and That's a lot of pressure. So I don't know, just putting that on the table.
Thank you, Sophia. That is true. That is something Billy had flagged as something we needed to address. I believe I have freely admitted already in meetings that it is not my strong suit to try to keep my head together and take notes. So I am always thrilled with delegating that task, but I'm not sure to whom it should be delegated. So thoughts welcome.
Yeah, I guess I would just ask Jane, has there been a practice in other groups on how this is handled?
Some subcommittees are rotating note-taking. Two subcommittees in particular are lucky enough to have just support staff from outside organizations who are doing the minute taking. So yeah, I should have mentioned perhaps in my updates that there's also this cheat sheet, Billy, that you had asked if it was already developed, but we have Melissa and I, who Melissa obviously has been supporting a lot of the administration of all of the Climate Council and subcommittee work. She is the executive assistant for Secretary Young, trying to minimize her engagement until we have a program technician hired within A&R to support this kind of administration. We have worked on a cheat sheet on process so that you all know what the requirements are for agendas, minutes, posting, all of that, including providing you all templates for minutes and agendas so that they can come in the best ready to go kind of format as possible. And so the minutes, as we've discussed in the past, should be very high level, should really focus on actionable items as well as where consensus was reached. And then really, draw folks' attention to the video recording that is linked in all of the minutes. So hopefully the minutes won't be too cumbersome. It's been wonderful that this is Lauren's third time taking them, but that's duly noted. And perhaps unless she wants to do it every time, it makes sense just for now to rotate them until additional capacity can be brought in through a program tech or others to help with minutes.
That sounds fine with me. So I don't know if we want to spend any more time on this right now. Okay. Great. Thanks, Sophia, for flagging that. And I'm sure there'll be other things we can dial in as we meet going forward. All right. So I think the other two main things we want to cover today is just to check in on our milestones, our deliverables, and how we're going to pull together a work plan to accomplish those. Fortunately, it sounds like Jane's going to serve us up some tools to use in that regard, but we should still have a conversation to make sure everyone's on the same, is kind of level set everyone's expectations and understanding. And then it would be great to spend a little time before we adjourn with the state of Vermont staff and just begin the conversation around what their role is, and so they have some understanding about their exposure going forward. So I'm going to share my screen and just pull up these milestones briefly so that everyone has them in front of them in case they're not familiar with them. Here they are. And as you can see, we're basically, our subcommittee is now formed. It's almost mid-March. And our next deliverable is at the March 22nd Vermont Climate Council meeting, when we need to present effectively our charter, our charge, and then a work plan and any sort of contractual service needs we might have to achieve our goals. Following quickly on that, at the end of April, we need to do some evaluation of how we get to the emission reduction and resilience targets that we're shooting for as a subcommittee. And then by the end of May, we have to have a framework for that drafted to share with the full council. And then that kicks off a period of public engagement. Those proposals are refined over the summer. And then ultimately the climate plan is developed, and then it goes back out for public review as a complete plan in the fall, and then we wind it down in November. Anything to add to that timeline, Jan?
Nope, I think that's it. I mean, that's as coarse as you can be, recognizing that each of those components leading up to May have a lot in them.
Right. So I'm going to stop sharing now because I think folks get the point. But so basically, we've got a lot of work to do between now and May. We need to kind of nail down what we're trying to accomplish and develop a plan to get there. And it sounds like we might want to spend the bulk of next Friday morning's meeting working with the tool that Jane will develop for us to kind of refine what our scope and charge is and prioritize the tasks associated with it and start to come up with a work plan. I don't think we can accomplish too much of that today, but curious if others have thoughts or comments or suggestions on this topic.
So before this meeting, I was actually on the phone with Ellen Griswold from the American Farmland Trust. She was actually on Maine's Natural and Working Lands group within the Maine Climate Council work, and trying to sort of flesh out with her how they had begun this process. And Maine was dealing with a much bigger group. They had about 25 people that were engaged in this work of the subcommittee. But she said that something that had helped them sort of get grounded was to start with the specific opportunities and challenges for both within mitigation and adaptation within sort of the three, as they saw it, major buckets, natural wildlands, ag land, and forest land. And then from there, they were able to sort of break out into smaller groups, both to think about whether it was financial incentives or research that was needed or technical assistance or land conservation, and then how you would address those needs cross-sectorally within the three buckets of land. I don't know if we want to do it the same way, but I always find it helpful to sort of bounce up against the way that somebody else has done it to sort of formulate our own process. So I guess I would just offer that, and any thoughts welcome. And if anybody else has thoughts aside from that, great.
We do have a pretty explicit charge that was based in the statute that I'm trying to dig up in my email here, but I'm not having a lot of luck with it. But I think, that kind of speaks to some of what you're saying, Abby, is that, I think we kind of identify what our goals are. But if anyone else on the subcommittee has it, please pull it up. I'm going to keep trying to find it.
I have to bow out, otherwise I would have pulled it up for you. But I just want to mention that to avoid, rather than doing work groups as one suggestion, as you start to consider how to actually manage the work, in the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee, they did an exercise where they sort of popcorned ideas of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, with respect to previous work done. And then they assigned task leaders to the 5 areas that they're focused in on. And so it might be important with a committee this large to think about having folks who organize the work, the body of work within the areas that you choose to focus in on, whether it's forest, ag, others, and that way each meeting they could facilitate the conversations around that. Obviously, that'll inform once you finalize the subcommittee charge. But so anyway, sorry I have to run, but that was one suggestion. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Okay, so Allie, thanks for dropping the initial charge in the chat. I just pasted in there the charge as the initial subcommittee had discussed revising it, so slightly expanding it to be mindful of ecological resilience, to look at impacts associated with land conversion, not only agricultural and forestry uses, and to advise other groups on the siting of energy generation. So really it's come up with a carbon budget, figure out kind of what the baseline is for our working in natural lands, sequestering, storing, and emitting greenhouse gases, come up with strategies to maintain that baseline, if not improve upon the carbon reduction benefits we get from our landscape. And then figure out which of those strategies have the most co-benefits or benefit other public policy goals and resilience goals. And then the other big bucket is looking at emissions from the ag sector and how we bring those in line with our reduction targets. So it's a lot of work. It seems like there's at least two or three subgroups that would emerge from that scope. You know, one focused on the carbon budget, one focused on agricultural emissions, and maybe one focused on other land use resilience pieces. So I don't know if folks have any thoughts on that right now. Mr. Mears.
Thanks, Billy. I want to go back to Abby's point, because honestly, when I think about the expertise of the folks on this group, it doesn't seem to me that we're going to be the right folks to do the math on, adding up the numbers for carbon emissions. And if we organize ourselves in the order of the charges, I think it doesn't feel like it'll be a good use of our time. But organizing around the buckets that are either in the Maine plan or the Wisconsin plan or the Mass decarbonization plan, picking something like, like ag lands, forest lands, and I can't forget the third one, but that makes sense to me to have our work organized, and then we can do cross-cutting. Having looked at each, say we identify a set of strategies under each one of those categories, then there can be some technical work that can be done that others will have to do. I think staff will, or somebody that we are contractors that we identify, to have to go through and say, okay, if you did that strategy, here's how many metric tons of carbon would be either reduced or stored. Anyway, that makes sense to me in terms of more sense in terms of an approach.
No, I like it. Lauren, your hand's up.
Yeah, partial response to David too. Just David, this is your first subcommittee meeting, so for visibility on that expertise, one, we do have the state's climate forester in the room to help us with those questions. Thank you, Allie. But we also have the benefit of the folks on the science and data subcommittee who are supposed to be working in support of each of the other subcommittees. So any scientific or database wherewithal that we would need to kind of like outsource to them, we can do, and the opportunity to identify technical expertise, I think, Billy, is something that's still up in the air for potential addition, especially with, okay. So anyway, my mind is kind of focused around 4 different buckets. There's the emissions reductions conversation strategies from the agriculture and, to a lesser degree, but forestry sectors. The natural climate solutions, carbon sequestration work, the nature-based solutions, resilience, climate adaptation work, and then also the food systems, food security. And those aren't completely independent buckets. There's obviously a lot of overlap there, especially with joint mitigation and adaptation actions, but that's the way that my brain's working based on this charge. And I wonder if those would be good buckets. I'm just throwing those out there too.
Could you run through those just real quickly again, without explanation, Lauren, just so that I hear them all in a row?
Yep. Emissions reductions, carbon sequestration, nature-based solutions, resilience adaptation, and food systems, food security.
David, did those align adequately with the sort of sector-based vision that you have?
I think they could. I don't know that I quite get the distinction between the. I mean, this, as Lauren said, there's an overlap between these. So I think there's some value in trying to define a little bit more, like the difference between natural climate solutions and nature-based solutions. And anyway, so I think with some more elaboration, I'm sure that can work.
Sophia, do you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just kind of thinking, like, with all that you guys have said, like, I was thinking along the same lines as Lauren. How I see this going forward is like visually. So we have like our big goal, like a big circle with our big goal, like our ultimate goal, and below that we have, it's like, think of it as like a pond, and then it goes down these streams, and it's like all these other little ponds, which are the subgroups, which could be what Lauren was just saying. And from there we go down on each of those groups and see which like what organizations or what things are already being done to influence those subgroup topics. And then from there, like we have, oh my God, this is so confusing, but like we have what's being done and then strategies we would want to implement, and then run it by the science and data to see what numbers show up. But it's kind of like a stream, so it's like the big circle and then the 4 other buckets, and then 2 for each of the 4 buckets of strategies we can do and strategies that are being done already. That was really confusing, but like that's kind of just like how I see it. And then run numbers by people in this subcommittee and also science and data.
Well, certainly I love the idea of using a watershed analogy for our work at hand. That seems appropriate.
You know, and I think it's a good point. There's been a lot of good work done on all these topics. So I think a starting place for all the focus groups will be, you know, looking at what is out there for existing strategies and ideas, and then kind of weighing their pros and cons. So it sounds like really the primary task is to take that charge and try to build some structure around it so that we know how to focus our efforts. And I think we've had some good conversation with David's ideas, Lauren's, Sophia's, and I don't know if we want to take this any further today or if folks want to just reflect on this between now and next week. And, you know, hopefully the tool that Jane provides us to structure our work plan might assist with this exercise, and we come back on Friday and really focus our time on nailing this down. But if we want to have more conversation today or other has thoughts, certainly go for it.
I'll just jump in to say sector-based grouping for tackling some of the primary questions makes a lot of sense, provided there's, of course, and I don't think anyone's saying preclude that, but definitely need input and review, discussion from those that are focused on other sectors, as well as there's managers that manage many different types of land and lots of value in ensuring that recommendations or options that come up are understood and communicated and reviewed by others as well.
Other thoughts? Jake.
Yeah, definitely need a little more time to look at this charge to kind of make sense of the possible interconnections and way of arranging things. But I mean, it does seem to me that the first one, the developing a carbon budget is a very analytical, quantitative task. And so that one to me kind of sits distinctly apart from the other elements of the charge, which have interconnections and kind of different ways in which you could kind of break them apart and put them back together. So that's just kind of an initial impression of seeing those elements of the charge together.
It's helpful. Yeah, I think that's going to really lay, that carbon budget is going to somewhat lay the kind of foundation for a lot of the other work. It's going to let us know what we're working with, what the baseline is, and then the levers that some of the other work will pull will kind of build upon and affect that. John Roberts has his hand.
Well, just to say, I mean, just kind of getting up to speed, being the first meeting I've attended, so I'm going to have to mull over the 5 points here, and knowing full well that agriculture obviously has a significant impact, both in emissions and in possible solutions or mitigations. Is probably, I'm not sure there's any solution. There's a mitigation. So yeah, I'll take a little moment or two to like the next week to mull over some of this.
Great, and I just sent around that charge via email to the group as well, so it's there if that's how you manage your documents. Let's see, David has had his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Billy. I wanted to share a reflection just for reaction from the committee and those of you who've been thinking about this longer, just to make sure I'm on the right track of thinking. I'm jumping all the way to the end of this process and imagining that the combination of information that we provide to the legislature that says, here's the, some estimates of emissions and opportunities for emission reductions, and that ultimately they'll be looking at that to help prioritize a set of policy approaches, and that some of the policy approaches are going to hit on multiple areas. That is, they'll run across buckets, no matter how we organize this work. So, for instance, just to pick on John and on this your sector and background, like let's say a major recommendation was that we provide incentives for farmers to do more hay, grass-based dairy, for instance, or grass-based, livestock raising to shift away from corn. I don't know if that'll be someplace we land, but let's say that was it. That could be tied to a whole bunch of different categories. There's a set of, carbon storage and sequestration. There's some mitigation, emissions reductions. So, and it could be considered, related to food systems and food security. So as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking in some ways the buckets are important to pick, but we don't have to get them perfect, because no matter what categories we pick, there's going to be strategies that run across all of those. And ultimately, our goal will be to have laid out some strategies that the legislature can just pick from, like a menu, and then they can have a sense of what the costs and pros and cons and the carbon reduction benefits are.
Absolutely. And just a point of clarification, the charge of the Climate Council is to provide a climate action plan for ANR to immediately move into rulemaking so that those proposals can be executed in the near term. So certainly for the 2025 and 2030 reduction targets, this isn't giving the legislature a menu, it's deciding what the strategies are that will be implemented in the next 2 to 5 years. So certainly for the 2050 goal, I think, and to a lesser extent, the 2030 goal, there's probably more of that, here are the different pathways, but for some of the short-term work, I think there is some expectation that the plan will provide very clear guidance on what has to happen next. But yeah, I agree with you. This is all, I really see the opportunity here is like everything that we're going to do to reduce emissions has some potential upside across many sectors. And part of the work of the council and the subcommittee is to kind of find the most co-benefit that we can pull out of the process so that it really supports Vermonters all across the state. Before you go, Lauren, Ryan had his hand up. Are you good, Ryan?
When we dig into the specific charge, I think next week, I just have some questions about some of the phrasing of the points within the 5 points. So I'll table that. This is a much more important discussion, higher level.
Okay, Lauren, then Allie.
Yeah, just wanted to haven't had a conversation yet about the level of clarity that needs to be incorporated into the climate action plan, which is something that all of us as subcommittee members really do need. So I do, Billy, agree with you that there should be some pretty specific steps for the 2025 deadline and to a lesser extent 2030 and beyond. But I do think that there will also need to be some serving up something for the legislature to work on in the next half of the biennium.
Fair enough. Allie.
Hi, yeah, just wanted to offer, I've been following some of the other states' process in this as I'm kind of the representative for the U.S. Climate Alliance for Forestry. And one thing that Maine struggled with is they didn't have their carbon budget in time for some of this work. So I just want to suggest that doing that carbon budget, it's super necessary, but it could take, some time. And so that shouldn't impede us from, or impede the committee from, the subcommittee from thinking about strategies. We might not know those actual numbers and be able to run them and get estimates, but I think going forward would be prudent and not waiting for that. Because it could realistically take a little bit of time to get that carbon budget.
Absolutely. And I think that may be one area, I'd ask you to think, Allie, about what role some external consultants could play in helping us develop that, whether that would just complicate things and we have sufficient capacity in-house, or if that could help kind of juice things and move them along. So please give that some thought.
That was going to be my next comment was, pardon my ignorance, but where does that expertise lie? Who are we going to need to rely on? Is this a place where we need to identify contractual needs, for example, all of those things, I think, which we can ruminate on for the rest of the week and bring back to next week, but wanting to put that forward that I think we've well established that potentially among those of our faces that are here today, establishing the carbon budget is likely not something that we can accomplish ourselves. And so identifying the people who can seems to be top of the priority list at the moment. And I'm just cognizant, Judy, that you haven't said much, and I'm just wondering if you did have any reflections you wanted to share. If not, no worries. David, I think you had your hand up.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Judy.
I don't have any comments. My head is buzzing because I am aware, we have 5 groups that we work with in Maine. I'm aware of the carbon tax credits they get and how it's used. And also I'm also aware of the traditional ways in which they sequester carbon in their gardens, in their livelihoods. And so I'm thinking to myself, which pot would this all fit into? So my mind is just racing right now, listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. David?
Yeah, thanks, Abby. I was going to just tee off something that Ali said about the U.S. Climate Council, which triggered for me something I've kind of assumed would happen, but the subcommittee may have already dealt with this. But if not, and maybe it's a good, helpful suggestion. But the Climate Council has a number of really terrific experts. I've talked with some of them. I talked with Jen Phillips yesterday, who seems like a really good person we should hear from. And someone mentioned American Farmland Trust, and there's a number of NGOs that they're already funded. Like the state of Vermont doesn't have to pay them anything. I think they'd be happy to come talk to us about what they've seen in other states. And I'm hopeful that we could hear from some of those folks. I'm thinking, Abby, back to the work we did on in John and some of the farm and water conversations. That was a really successful model for a committee like this, to have someone come in and talk for 10 minutes with from their background and provide some expertise, and then it provides some really good fodder for us to work with. That
is definitely at least one of the priorities as I see it, is sort of after we get a broad watershed overview of the tasks ahead, to start to bring in the people and perspectives that can help us. I don't like to do work twice. I think, the work smarter, not harder is a great thing. So any sort of ability we have to bring in people who, have already done this and have wisdom to share, I am all for, and I think will definitely be a big part of the next few months.
Agreed, and we should move on to the next topic shortly. But I guess the last thing I'd say on that is I'd really encourage you to think about the work group model or the kind of alternative model that David articulated, because I don't see how we're going to be able to bring in those sorts of experts to this full subcommittee on all the topics that we're covering. I could see a group focused on ag emissions, digging deep into this, meeting with these groups, doing that work, and then reporting back to the larger subcommittee. I just don't know that it's going to work any other way. So let's give that some thought next time. All right, we only got a couple of minutes left, but I want to just give some time to talk about staffing, unless there's anything else on this item. Great. So, Lauren.
Yeah, just for point of clarification on the notes, is the next step then I have subcommittee members are going to review the draft charge that you just sent around, Billy, over the next week and come to our meeting next Friday, the 12th, prepared to discuss and finalize language. Is that right?
Yes. And
okay.
Review whatever documents Jane sends in preparation of developing a work plan.
Okay.
May I ask, do we think it would be helpful for folks to also have or come prepared for next week with their initial take on who is already doing some of this work, or am I getting ahead of myself?
I think identifying existing resources, as David spoke to, whether it's other initiatives in other states or other local experts that are working in these areas, and depending on our specific areas of focus, it might be good to have a list or something to share for consideration, whether it's the subcommittee or something in a future meeting to come and present to the whole subcommittee. Might be useful.
Yeah, even if we don't get to it specifically, just I encourage everyone to kind of compile those lists of resources.
I was gonna quickly say, maybe we could just share like a document and have like a title, and then people could drop links or just names of people, and just have it circled around so people aren't like going all over and things aren't being doubled. So we can all just see it on one doc. I don't know. It's just an idea.
I love that idea, Sophia. We'll just have to check in with Jane because I'm not really sure where all of that landed, the open meeting law and the public portal ability. So I will check in on that. But I appreciate the idea. I think it's a great one. Jake?
Yeah, I think one thing that we can all do is, in looking at the charge, is to really identify also where our expertise may lie or interests in putting energy and capacity, so that we can, come in next Friday and really have a sense of like, all right, where do we fall, where are we most interested in committing, our expertise, and that might help then also kind of figure out sort of the work group, subgroup kind of structure of things as well.
And that's a good segue, since we're basically at, Judy, I'm sorry, you got your hand up. Please go ahead.
Just a question, is there anybody on this committee that is involved in land trusts?
Yes, I think many of us have had experience working with the land trust community in the past. I don't know that anyone here currently is on the board or staff of a land trust, but we've got some pretty good depth across different members.
So I've been working with some of the land trusts. They've been creating a format or a use statement to allow Beniki people to use the land that they own. And so since we don't have reservations, that land could also be considered someplace to work on sequestering carbon, as the reservations do.
It's a great suggestion.
And also we Maggie Donan is on NOFA's board and is also works for VLT. And I'm so for sure we have the ability to bring in some folks who are working directly with VLT, and Billy used to work with them, and we have a conservation easement. And so I love that idea, Judy, and I think there's a ton of potential there for sure.
VLT just created a land use statement for the Benicky, and thousands of acres of land is listed on there that's available.
For sure.
So I apologize. I really need to go because I've got another meeting right now. Last thing I say is that, you know, we have the ability to bring in others who aren't subcommittee members, but with expertise to kind of advise us going forward. So keep that list in mind of folks that you want to hear from. State of Vermont staff, apologies that we didn't really have time to talk through staffing. But as you can see, we're still trying to figure out our own stuff here. But my hope is that once we have our work plan dialed in, you'll have real clarity around what your focus is, how you plug in, and you won't be expected to just kind of come to all these meetings without knowing if there's going to be a role for you to participate so that you can spend your time most effectively. So sorry we didn't get to you all today, but we'll certainly figure it out going forward.
And also,
before we adjourn, sorry, just a public comment before we adjourn, just making sure we make space for that.
Thank you. So any other subcommittee conversation before we move on to public comment? Okay, Abby, I need to bow out. Do you mind taking it from here? Great, thanks everybody.
Kelly.
Oh no, I was just waving.
Oh. Okay, so the other thing I was going to say is, yes, thank you so much to the state of Vermont staff, and my personal apologies as well. But I do think a place where we could definitely bring you in next week is if you are willing to come with a similar list or thoughts towards resources, people, et cetera, existing programs, that would be a great place for you to begin to plug into the work at hand, if that makes sense. And is everyone good with me opening it up for public comment? Sweet. All right. So, members of the public, please feel free. Now is your chance. Oh, Judy, I see your hand is still up. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I don't have anything to add. I don't know how to put it down.
Okay, I just put it down for you. Okay, so public comment?
Thanks. Abby, do you mind if I jump in? This is Zach Porter of Conservation Law Foundation. Good to see you all again, and especially those members of the committee who are new since the last time I chimed in when you were all together last. Thanks for a good conversation today, and wanted to just make a couple comments briefly. One is I'm trusting this will be the case, but wanted to just put a fine point on it that, sounds great that there might be some subcommittees starting to work on various things. And I wanted to just ensure that those, to the degree possible, are also publicly accessible. Meetings, I'm assuming that there's probably a formal, reason for that, but just, would like to just put that out there. I wanted to also check on a couple other related kind of process things. One is, if the public might also be able to participate in suggesting resources for the committee's consideration, both, in terms of a library of materials, as well as, speakers who you might benefit from hearing. That would also be great for members of the public, I think, to be able to know how they might, contribute those ideas to the committee. And then I want to just make a comment about the Climate Council website. Perhaps this has come up already and I'm just not aware of it, but I'm wondering if somebody is working on the back end to potentially make it a little more user-friendly for the public to be able to kind of see, how the committees are working and the materials that, will start to become a part of this, whole discussion and whatnot. People are smiling, so I'm thinking that maybe this has already come up. But I just.
It is something that I believe there is an awareness around the relative. Oh, Lauren has something to say. Lauren's on the steering committee, so why don't we let Lauren? It's probably something they've spoken about.
Zach, thanks for flagging that. That's something that I actually just brought up in our steering committee yesterday. I believe that the state of Vermont is working on creating subsections of the Climate Council website so that each of the subcommittees has their own link, so we can have it's not just the ongoing list of all the meetings and all of the documents. So it should be organized sooner rather than later, hopefully. But thanks for that feedback. We're all feeling it.
And at the council, also at the council level, Zach, there has been a lot of talk about how we can increase public accessibility and also creating some type of a public portal for exactly what you're talking about, to be able to feed information in that way, which I think is, I hope, going to be like a great way to bring in all of the requisite expertise that's around the state of Vermont. And so I will check back in with Jane about the process that they're making with that. It does all become very tricky with open meeting law, but transparency is important, so here we are. But for sure, the sub meetings will also be publicly warned, and you will be able to attend those as members of the public as well, as far as I understand it.
Okay, terrific. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time today. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. Was there anybody else? Steve Crowley?
Hi, thanks a lot. Great discussion. It's a complicated topic that you have here. One thing that I wanted to bring up is that for me, reading through the act, which I have a few times, one of the most confusing parts to me in the whole thing is related to this. It's that area of where the law talks about offsets and various places it talks about natural systems to do all the things you're talking about, and sequestration and all. And so I just find the way the law is written is a little confusing. It's not clear how all these things fit together. There's something about alternative reductions. There's something about offsets. There's something about additionality. There's something about net zero. And it's not clear to me as I read it how your work fits into that with regard to reductions. It's very clear that it's a priority, but it's not clear to me as I read it how it fits in. So that's just a comment. I don't know what you do with that, but it might be useful to try to clarify that for all of us who are trying to watch. And yeah, I don't actually have any suggestions about how to do that, but I just I do find it a little confusing, and it is I think in the history of it, different pieces were added at different times and not really tied together well, but they all land in your lap somehow, I think. So I look forward to how you figure that out. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I think we are all finding our way and aware of the trickiness of fitting all of the different pieces and moving parts together. As we find clarity, which we are all intent on doing, we hope to share that. I guess that's all I can say to that. Was there anybody else that wanted to add anything? Okay, looks like no, and I'm cognizant of the time and that I have to go get my kids. So with that, thank you so much to everybody, to our new subcommittee members. It's so great to have you, and we're really looking forward to the work ahead. And as we've all discussed, I think there's a lot of opportunity ahead, and I'm choosing to focus on that hopeful piece of the work. So unless there is anything else, we'll say goodbye for today. Have a good rest of your weekend. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
It's Friday, right?
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.